Hi folks, welcome to my 8-Bit Retro Journal. Right now I'm playing with my ZX simulator. I just ported or programmed in a game called Klingon that I found on the online JTY emulator and thought, hey, that's kind of a cool game, so I typed it in. And yeah, kind of works. I had to make a few changes because I don't support peeks and pokes, but got it to work with a little bit of math, and yeah, it looks pretty good. Anyway, today actually I want to talk more about multitasking, not my ZX simulator. I did two videos on comparing the QL to the Mac, the multi-finder from 1987, not the original Mac, since the original Mac didn't have multitasking. And I've been working this week a bit with the Amiga. I had never used it before, other than I used a friend's playing some games, but I never actually installed software or the actual operating system itself. So I've been using the WinUAE emulator, which is the Amiga emulator, and learned a little bit about how to use it. And so I want to compare the QL, which was the first microcomputer to have preemptive multitasking system, came out in '84, to the Amiga, which came out in '85. The Amiga 1000 was the second one to have it, and just to see how they fare. Now, if you saw my first two parts, you saw that the Mac with multi-finder could multitask, but as a programmer, it was really a pain to have to code that up. So even though user experience might be the same, for programming, it was not as fun. And so I want to just see how the QL and the Amiga fare. And also, just to be clear, I'm not suggesting the QL was a better computer than either the Mac or the Amiga. Both of the Mac and the Amiga were much more successful than the QL. But sometimes an unsuccessful product might have had some really good ideas in it. And I think the operating system in the QL was pretty neat. And so I just wanted to see, obviously, had the QL been more successful, what would its operating system? How would its operating system have impacted the computing industry in the early '80s? Because it has a really good multitasking core in there. So we're going to compare the Amiga and the QL today to see if they're the same, the similar, different, etc. All right. Unfortunately, I don't have an Amiga. I do have a QL, so I'm going to have to go back to using emulators, which I prefer not to use. But if you don't have hardware, you got to do it in software. So once again, I'm using my Macintosh, running Windows 7, and I'll be doing running a couple of emulators, WinUAE and the Q2K, to demonstrate the differences. So let's get started. One thing that piqued my curiosity was I was reading up on the kernel, and I saw this quote right here by this comment by Linus Torvalds, who described the Amiga design as cooperative because the kernel ran not in privileged mode, but in user mode. And so it lacked memory protection or protection between tasks. And so, as he put it, the reason for that is he argued that because a lack of memory protection between tasks meant a task could hinder the system from operating preemptively. A task would need to choose not to stop the preemptive mechanism. That would reduce this would reduce to a kind of inverted cooperative system. So, so the 68000 has a set of traps that a kernel can use, and the exec kernel on the Amiga, which was the small 13K multitasking kernel, did not run in privileged mode. On the QL, it did. So there is a difference between the two of them. So I wanted to sort of see the difference. I want to compare it to the Amiga 1000, but one other comment about the Amiga OS, John Dvorak, who was a famous author for, I think it was Byte magazine, owned an Amiga, and he was very fond of it. And this quote kind of demonstrates how well the operating system was designed from the user perspective. The Amiga OS remains one of the great operating systems of the past 20 years, incorporating a small kernel and tremendous multitasking capabilities, the likes of which only recently been developed in OS 2 and Windows NT. The biggest difference is that the Amiga OS could operate fully and multitask in as little as 250 GB of address space. Even today, the OS is only about 1 megabyte in size. To this day, there is very little memory hogging, CD-ROM loading, OS
little memory hogging CD-ROM OS can do that Amiga can't. Tight code, there's nothing like it. I've had Amiga for maybe a decade. It's the single most reliable piece of equipment I've ever owned. It's amazing. You can easily understand why so many fanatics out there wondering why they are alone in their love for the thing. The Amiga continues to inspire, vibrant, but be it cult-like community, not unlike that which you have with Linux, the Unix clone. So he's already introducing Linux as the Unix clone. The interesting part about Linus Torvalds' comment on the Amiga is, if you look at the Sinclair QL, which is the machine that we'll be comparing to, Linus actually owned one. It was the first computer he bought after he moved on from, I think, a VIC-20 that his grandfather gave him. And it says here on the QL page, Linus Torvalds has attributed his eventual development of Linux kernel, likewise having preemptive multitasking, in part to having owned a Sinclair QL in the 1980s because of the lack of support, particularly in Finland. Torvalds became used to writing his own software rather than relying on programs written by others. His transition with the Sinclair his frustration with the Sinclair led years later to his purchase of a more standard IBM PC compatible, on which he would develop Linux. This doesn't necessarily, this is kind of written in a nice light for the QL. It doesn't necessarily say that he learned multitasking on the QL. It just was frustrated with its lack of support and learned how to program. Whereas on the Amiga, he actually specifically talks about the kernel. And I think what makes sense in that regard is that the Amiga was more well known and it became a staple. And if you look at Dvorak's, John Dvorak's comment, likely as Linus was developing his kernel, he was getting some pushback from Amiga folks that said, wow, well, is yours as good as the Amiga's? And so he took a look at it. So I'm not suggesting that the comment he makes on Amiga versus the fact that he had a QL and didn't, and attributes that to his development of Linux, does not necessarily mean that he's saying that QL's preemptive kernel is great. He may not even have cared about it so much, but it's interesting nonetheless. In any case, the Amiga 1000 came out in '85 in July. I think it didn't really ship until maybe September, so it was a few months delayed. The QL came out in January, but wasn't shipped until April, probably, or even May, so spring of that same year. So they were both delayed a bit. And this is the one I want to run against. Although when I ran the WinAE emulator, I actually had to use a 500, which came out in '87. They both have about the same. The QL screen resolution is 512 by 256. And the Amiga, from what I saw, was 640 by 256. I saw it somewhere here. They have it down here in the, 640 by, I'm sorry, 640 by 512 well, 640 by 256, and I think this is the interlaced mode they're talking about. So I think they had similar, I think it's 640 by 400 NTSC, and the QL was 512 by, I think, well, 512 by 256 was the high resolution mode. So the Amiga obviously has better graphics than the QL. I got some of my information on the operating system on the Amiga, because it's really, I'm learning the first time on the Amiga Museum, which is pretty good, and they have a section on workbenches, the operating system, Kickstart and workbenches. And I don't really understand the numbering, but workbenches, I really wanted to get as close to the original as possible. And so they did have Workbench 1.0, where is it? Workbench 1, right, 1.0. And they kind of give you the look for it. And this is sort of a screenshot. Very two-dimensional. It's got a simple trash can. It's got these demo programs. 1.1, which came after that, was very similar. I don't think they changed too much of it. I actually got 1.1 running, but I couldn't get Aztec, the C compiler to run. But look, it's still very one-dimensional. And the preferences on both give you the Amiga 1000 chassis, which is interesting. And this came out in So the Workbench 1 came out in '85 with the Amiga 1000. This came out a few months after that. So I thought that would be a good one to run, but I couldn't get it to work with the Aztec C compiler because there were some commands that were missing for installation. Then 1.1 came out, and again, they show you the differences between the screens. And it added sort of a better looking trash can, but still it kind of has that same look. And it was 1.3 that came out afterwards. So this was in 1986. So again, just a year later, or less than a year later. And then finally, 1.3, this is the one I'm going to use, came out 2 years after that in '88. And it created 3D looking graphics, even though they were two-dimensional. The trash can changed and added some functionality. And so that's the one I'm going to compare to on the Amiga side to the QL. I'm going to use the Aztec C compiler, which came out in January of 1989. That's going to run on an 88 operating system on the Amiga. This is going to compare to the Sinclair QL came out in '84 and was discontinued in '86. And the Amiga 1000 actually had a similar, it came out in '85 and was continued in '87, but it had a successor. So the QL didn't, and obviously it had many successors, and so it was a successful machine. Had 128K of memory, and I'm going to actually add a graphical front end to it called ICE, which came out in '85. So only version 1.0. So it's actually more fair to look at ICE and try to compare it to Workbench 1, right? So which was a little simpler. It did, in fact, I couldn't find a command shell, but I think it had one. But it was a little simpler than 1.3 that I'm going to use. And it should be noted that it was never upgraded because the QL, this came out in '85 and the QL was discontinued in '86. So Idersoft, the company, never had a chance to upgrade that. And of course, the QL has continued since, and there's a new OS for it out, just like there is for the Amiga. There's a pointer environment and a graphical interface that is not this, but it has its inconsistencies. And for my retro journal, I really want to focus on 1984, '85, or the mid '80s, I guess, and not focus so much on what's been done since, because both machines, Amiga was much more successful, but both machines have a cult following. Really just want to compare, the QL from '84, '85 to the Amiga from '85, '86, maybe '87, just to see how they compare in terms of their operating system and multitasking. So it's a less developed system, and you'll see how that manifests itself. But you can see they had an idea of actually expanding that, so it's kind of pretty cool. And then I'm going to use Digital C, which came out, it says 20 years since 2009, so it came out in '89. I do have the source, and it looks like it's got date codes of '87, '88, and '89 in there, and I did buy it in 1990, so that's when Digital C came out. All right, so that's what I'm going to do. So let's go right into the Amiga, start the emulator up, and I'm going to load a configuration, and that is for Workbench. So yeah, I created a Workbench 1.1, but I couldn't get it to work. And basically, RAM I set to 1 megabyte. It's got a hard disk, and display is 1020 by 812. And I'm using the 1.3 ROM, and this is actually what was recommended. I could set this to 1000, but it actually said it's the same if you set it to 8500, so it's pretty close to the 1000. And I'm running it at speed. The speed of it is I think someplace I have it as 0% acceleration, so it's running at actual speed. And I don't know where that actually sits at the moment. It's is it on a chipset? No, someplace here it'll tell you that. In any case, is it miscellaneous? So there was ROM. There was a place where CPU speed right here, 0%. So I'm not accelerating. Okay, let's start it. So what the WinUAE, it didn't take me too long to sort of figure this out. There were lots of good helpful pages. WinUAE kind of takes over the screen. So you can see it's booting up now, and I have to do Alt-Tab to get out of that so I can be on the desktop. So that's a little annoying, but oh well. I like better the way Basilisk and VMAC Mini or Mini VMAC did that. So here we are, we're booted up, and you can see that it says it's 1.3, but the versioning is really crazy, and I don't understand what this is. But anyway, it creates a RAM disk, and if I open it up, it gives you, and it, unfortunately, I haven't learned yet how to make it keep the icons in a place where I put them. I copied some stuff from Workbench 1.1 over, like the demos, which was here, because I really wanted to demo the, do a similar demo that I did on the QL versus the Mac. One thing it doesn't do, I'm going to start the shell up, is it doesn't, if you do a dir on the shell, you'll see way more files than you see shown here. So the icons are icons that have info files, I assume, and it doesn't give you icons for everything, which is kind of like how Linux, I think, does its IDE, and Windows used to do it, and the Mac does it now. I like much better old school, like the original Mac, where every entity on the file had an icon. I think that was better. So we'll keep this open. We'll open the demos up, because here it has the bouncing ball, but I like the lines demo. So I'm going to start this up, and you'll notice I'm going to start it up twice. And this was the one thing I couldn't do on the Mac, but I could do on the QL. If you watch part 1 of my multitasking of the 80's video, and you can see right away we are multitasking on the Amiga, and it's kind of nice. I'm going to. It's a little slow, but again, it's unaccelerated. And yeah, here we go. Multitasking, doing pretty good. It's a kind of a neat graphical environment. I can flip this to the back or to the front, so that's kind of cool. And then it has, there is a basic. I think it's under, I copied it over. Yeah, I think it's in here. So this is a little bit of a mess too, but I'm going to open up Amiga Basic. And so here, again, starting up, Basic. This is Microsoft Basic. QL has its own, obviously. So I'm going to shrink this. And again, it's running slow because I'm running 2 other tasks in here, but that's the whole point, is I wanted to showcase that. So I don't really care about the speed at the moment. This is true for the QL and the Mac as well. So here we go. 1, 4. 4i equals 1. Wow. Equals 1 to 20. 20. Print I. 30. Next I. Good. So now in here I can actually say run it, and it will do da-da-da. There we go. And the most important part is, while this is running, I'm going to go. Let's put this in the background. Put this in the background. Let's close this up. I'm going to close this up too, since it's not that important. And then I'm going to bring this back to the background. There we go. So we've got these 2 things open, and we can make them a little bigger. And bingo, we've got multitasking. So they're both running, and running a yeah, they both of these things are running. Let's do it one more time. So I want make sure both of these are running while I'm in here. So boom. Again, it's writing it off the screen. That's the problem. I think if you get lucky, you'll see the. Yeah, I see it. Let's do it one more time. There we go. There, so they are both running. You can see they're both running while this is running. It's just that it's drawing this off an imaginary screen, and sometimes it disappears. So, but they're continuously running. It's just that if I made this bigger, I think it would help me. It would help see what's going on with the multitasking part. Just to show you that the original, and we all, I mean, it's well known the Amiga does a preemptive multitasking, but I just wanted to show that a simple thing like the basic interpreter doesn't actually interfere with that with regard to, so if you do that, so we see that running, now they're both going, and they're both still, yeah, they're both still, that was a perfect example of them both going. All right, so it can do it, yay. So I'm going to close basic now, since that was just my little demo, and I'll close these 2 now. So anyway, that's the Workbench, no, I'm not going to save it. That's Workbench 1.3, and like I said, there's lots of things I like about it. I like the command shell. One thing I haven't figured out yet is, once I compile a program and run it, it's tied to the shell, and I can't close the shell, and I don't know how to Control-C. I don't know how to run the program in the background. On the QL, I can do that. So let's go to the QL, just to show you how it's. So this time I'm using QL2K. I've been using QLA. They're all related. Well, QLA is the original emulator. QLA2 was an upgrade, and then somebody else took it over and created QL2K and added sound and other things. So I've been using that because I couldn't get the, so its configuration, it has this Idersoft ICE prom, and I couldn't get that working on QLA for whatever reason. And then I've added Toolkit 2, which came out in 1985, similar to how I'm using Workbench 1.3, which adds more functionality. And I needed that in order to install Aztec-C. I didn't actually need this for anything that I'm doing on the QL, but it adds command line support, which is nice. And it came out in 85, so I felt that was a nice add-on. I gave 1 megabyte to the Amiga, and it originally came out at 256K, so I added 768K. And so here, the QL came out at 128K, so I added 512 to give it 6040K. I thought that was pretty fair comparison. Again, it's running at real time, not any faster. And so let's boot it up. The one difference is, as this is booting up, the hard disk is actually stored as just a file, a hierarchical file on my Windows machine, and so that's nice. On the QL, it doesn't have a hierarchy of subdirectories and disks, but it can have at least on the emulator, you can have as many of these subdirectories attached to it. They're just flat files, so I can basically copy files from Windows into that and get the emulator to see it. So in that part, it's similar. But the QL in these early stages never had a hierarchical file system. But here you see is the ICE environment, and I need to configure it a little bit. So this, if you saw the going back to ICE here, it came in two forms. A ROM extension without a mouse support, so that just used keyboard, and one that had a mouse built into it. I'm using keys because the emulator doesn't seem to work with the mouse support of the ICE. And again, this was created by a third party in a year after the QL came out, and of course the QL discontinued, a few months after this came, or a year after this came out, and they never updated it. So it's not as fair to compare this to Workbench 1.3, which has a lot of advanced features, but to compare this rather to Workbench 1.0, which was a bit more flat and didn't have the full integration. And imagine if Idersoft continued, the company that built ICE, and the QL had a second generation computer, that there might be other things in here that this doesn't have. But it's still pretty nice for being a first version. So one thing to do is I have to customize this to change devices, and you can save the stuff on a micro drive, but I'm not going to use micro drives because it slows down the emulator. So I just have to redo this. And and so now if I double click on that, it shows files in there, and it actually does show every file that you have. So I like that. So like the Mac, and it gives icons depending on suffixes. So it's like the early version of Windows, although for executables like QLBG and QLDB, it actually reads the top of the file header and it figures out that it's an executable. So it does not use file extensions, so it doesn't need exe. So in some ways, it's a little better than the original Windows. So this knows it's a job, basically. All right. And again, it also says there's two jobs running, itself and the operating system. And you can do all sorts of things. So one thing you can't do is resize this window, move this window, or even move the files in this window. They're kind of static. So again, version 1, that's how they chose to do it. I can also look at what's in a file. So I can look at what's inside of boot by doing the following view to screen. And it just shows me that it just has 2 lines in. One cool thing you can do is you can actually redefine, you saw I could view by printer. I can go here and customize the printer. And if I know something about QDOS, I can say, oh, I can use the console window. And if I use the console window, and baud rate doesn't really matter, I can then, if I view the same file, and this time to printer, it'll actually print it to my console window, which is the screen. So unfortunately now I can't actually fix the screen. Certainly ICE will fix itself. Like if I open up the calculator again, times 6 equals 42. It works, yay. Unfortunately, it doesn't use keys, so you have to use the mouse. It's a little pain. It has a calendar as well. And again, the go through the years, the month. So that's all it does, and it does update itself so that within the window where it works. And by the way, I think it's under utilities. We have a calculator here as well, and this one's nicer because obviously you can move it, and I can use the keyboard. Right. So again, I haven't looked at whether it had a calculator for version 1.0, but as I said, this is a bit more advanced. But again, the one thing I like here is that all the files are mapped, so you don't have any hidden files, which is kind of nice. Okay, what I want to do and just to show you that so let's go to, so I can do MDV2 if I want. And this has some demo programs. If I run something, I just double click on it, and what it does when you run it, it actually will open up the program in exclusive mode. So the QL, there's two ways to run a job. You can run it with an exec or with an exec wait. And the exec wait basically has the job run taking over the process. So if I click CL, which is a little command shell that I showed last time, it'll run, and it'll literally, it takes just a little while to load. It'll run, and it literally will take over the machine. You can't task switch between the things, and which is a little bit of a pain, but so I can't do Control C. I can do whatever I want in here, but I can't. I can just exit out and I'll go back into ICE. So what I can do is I can leave ICE, and if I mode 4, if I execute MDV 2 CL, now I've executed it in non-exclusive mode, meaning that I can get the console back. Now, if you execute in exclusive mode and you have something else running, the other thing will still run. So if I go window 150, 10, 10, and I'll say 10, print hello, 20, go to 10. And if I run this and I go back here, and I then run exec w MDV2 CL, it'll start that up as well. Again, when it's doing I/O, the OS does stop processes, and that's perfectly acceptable. Now it's still running, and I can go window 150, 310. That moves it over there. So now, however, notice I can't do Control C anymore because this job has exclusive access. If I break, I can switch between the two, but the console window you can't get back. Now, if I quit this, nothing will happen because it'll just go back to this job. But if I quit this job, it'll give me console window back, right? So it's just that. So again, if I go exec w MDV2 CL, you'll see that as it runs. And again, window, it's much better when it's 150, 350, 10. So now if I quit this, I still don't get the console window back because this one had exclusive, it ran without wait basically. So the console just gave up control. But, and notice by the way, if I go exec MDV2 CL, and I'll put the window maybe in the middle just so it doesn't. All right, so I'll go window 150, 80, 100, 100. That's put right in the middle. So I'll go 10, print hello, 20, go to 10, run. If I go back and click ICE, you'll see that it'll actually be running, literally printing a message right in the middle of ICE. And it doesn't know about ICE, ICE doesn't know about it. It'll literally print, and then it'll just kind of destroy the screen. And so there's no, and if I do Control B, it'll quit. And so now I can actually get, and if I had two of them open, I could actually use Control C to switch between the two. So the console is the thing that's missing. And but if I run two of these, however, if I quit out of this now, it's interesting. If I quit out of this now, and I don't have anything running here, and then I just hit ice. Oops. I cannot get back into it. All right, so it has to be running. So again, ice does some funky stuff here. In any case, it does let you do some run applications. I like running them better in straight command shell mode because it allows me to. Oops, I'm not in here. It allows me to. Let me quit this. Mode 4. It allows me to run things, in parallel. And again, I'm going to end today's section. What we're going to do next time, let me just foreshadow this really quickly, is we have I have the digital C compiler, which is right here, and we're going to compile some code and run it. We'll do hello world. I wanted to do this in this one, but I don't want this to go too long. And then on the Amiga, we have, I need to be in this shell, we have CD Aztec, which has been installed. If I say execute Aztec shell, it'll run. Execute Aztec shell. It'll run, and then I literally, if I type CC, I have my C compiler. And here, if I type, if I double click on CC here, I have my digital C compiler, which I can compile either this way, and if I do this, it's wrong, or I can actually compile it using exec win6 CC and feed it options on the command line. So I can do it both ways, whereas in on the Amiga, it's obviously nicely tied in where I can just say CC ABC if I want. So we're going to do this next time in part 4. We're going to write some code on both these machines and see how they run. I'll end with, again, the multitasking. So exec mdv2 baton exe. So that's my baton controller program. And maybe I'll just do the same thing on this side under demos. Run that. Run a couple of these just to show you multitasking in action. It's quicker to get this started here. And I'm going to, yeah, so both of these are running now in their own windows. And then I'm going to go here, type 45, and do it again. MDV2 baton exe. And it's gonna, process has started up, and I can go 45, and there we go. Both of them are running. The Amiga is doing a little better job. Again, the Amiga is faster, even though they're about the same processor speed. It has a 68,000, which has a 16-bit data bus. This one doesn't, so it's doing a little faster job on that. But it's not about a speed comparison. This is about multitasking. So I'll see you guys for part 4, and stay safe.